Hi, good morning. This is J-Town, a podcast coming to you from Jerusalem, Israel. I'm here with my dear friend
Michael Doniger.
And my name is Hanoch Layman.
Hi, Hanoch.
Hi, Mike. And this is the second part of our series on the sabbatical year, the Shmittah year, and how it affects your private garden. I'm here with my dear friend
Michael Doniger.
And my name is Hanoch Layman.
Hi, Hanoch.
Hi, Mike. And this is the second part of our series on the sabbatical year, the Shmittah year, and how it affects your private garden. Before we get back into the second episode, let us just tell you a bit about J-Town. Mike, do you want to tell them a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're a new podcast and an evolving one, I would say, talking about Jews, Judaism, the Jewish world, and Jerusalem, and how they all sort of come together. And we hope to bring you maybe twice a month or once to twice a month to find interesting people and interesting topics that hopefully will engage you, enlighten you, maybe even enrage you. Hopefully not, but to make you think.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
All right, so you got me into gardening about 14 years ago, and I know you've been in for how many years?
22.
You did 22
Can't
before
blame
you
me
retired.
for that one.
I know. Well, thank you. I enjoy gardening.
Good.
And until your retirement into more broadcasting work. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of things to know that the average person doesn't know. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about preparing for Shmittah last time. Let's talk today about how to maintain that garden during the Shmittah year. What are some do's and don'ts, Michael, during that time?
I'm glad you asked. Maintain the garden do's and don'ts. First of all, during the Shmittah year, you can't just prune, as my friend Hanoch said in the last segment. You can do is if there's dead branches, diseased branches, branches that are blocking people's ways or even their view, you can cut them. You can cut them down. That's not a problem. Also, mowing. If those who are fortunate to have a lawn, you have to make sure that you mow it not at all the way down, because if you mow your lawn all the way down, it'll help increase the side spreading, because these are the kind of lawns that are here. They're hot weather and they tend to spread lateral-wise.
So the spreading lawn would be an enhancement, you're saying.
Right.
And therefore it would be problematic during the Shmittah year.
If you cut it too low.
That might happen if you don't cut it too low.
Let's say, I'll give you some numbers. Let's say an average lawn, you want to cut it down to maybe 5 to 7 centimeters from the ground, from the roots up. Cut it, use your lawnmower or the deck and just raise it up to maybe 10 centimeters to 11. And don't do it instead of, usually we cut lawns here sometimes 3-4 times a month. Almost every week you can do that because the kikuya grass grows really fast. Do it maybe twice a month or maybe once a month. Uh-huh. But don't ever let it grow, because if you do, then the roots below could get root rot. Mm-hmm. And that could destroy the whole. And then if you cut it down, it sometimes is very hard for that to recover. It gets really brown, and they can rot. That's called root rot.
So that would be a big loss, which would be something you're not obligated to sustain during the Shmittah year.
Exactly.
So you're saying cut it less often, but don't forget to cut it at all. Don't cut it less than once a month approximately.
Exactly.
For those of you that have lawns.
Right, and you can't, if you have bald spots, you can't put sand on there or anything like that, or sand or compost in this, because that encourages
growth.
And you can't also rake it. You can't take all the called the duff, the diseased undergrowth that usually, and you can't do that either, because that's like improving it. Mm-hmm. That's improving, and that helps the grass grow better. It helps the minerals. It helps the water drain better. It helps minerals, but it also helps them absorb better. So you can't do that. You can't. It's called dethatching.
Uh-huh.
Called dethatching.
All right.
So let's say, Hanoch, you got some beautiful roses, or you have some beautiful small plants, and you got a lot of weeds in there, right? And the weeds are getting really tall, because that's what weeds do, especially in the early spring. Yeah. Especially when you tend to, and the weather gets long, the sunlight gets longer, start getting warmer, and then the weeds explode. You've seen that, right?
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's like you go back from in the winter, it's like really nice, and then in the spring it looks like a jungle.
Right.
You can't even see. So that if the rule of thumb that if the weeds are taller than the plants themselves and they're competing for nutrients, for light, for water, then you can actually, if you see that the plant's really suffering, you actually can take it out by the roots. But most halachic authorities feel that you should try to cut it down, do it with make it less sort of a shinui or some sort of how would you say shinui in English?
Do it a different way.
Yeah, do it a slightly different way.
Not a normal way.
Not a normal way. Abnormal way.
It's just like on Shabbat. If I can catch your analogy, on Shabbat, if you have to move a muktzah object, for example, you do it with a little different way than you normally do it with the back of your hand instead of the front of your hand.
Right. Exactly.
So here, since you're forced to do some sort of agricultural activity during the Shmittah year, do it in a little different way. Cut it a little with backhanded way.
So with pest control, let's say you've got these aphids and thrips that tend to love. They're very hungry after the winter. They're hibernating, and they love those juicy roses. They love the little bulbs. The flowers. They come. The whatever. They're starting to bud. They go all over there. So let's say you're a commercial. If you were a commercial grower and you see these. You see these these aphids or thrips attacking your roses, you might be able to say, okay, I can spray them because I'm going to lose a lot of money. I'm going to lose.
You mean after the Shmittah year?
No, on the Shmittah year. On the Shmittah year, yeah, that's the whole thing.
Are they allowed to sell their roses during the Shmittah year?
Well, let's just say that's for another thing. But I'm just giving you like an example.
Okay.
But let's say you have like 3 or 4 little measly rose bushes, and let's say they start growing. You really can't. I mean, unless you really can't. You just have to let them eat it, and then if they eat it, then they'll be satiated, and then they won't get the second round. They went to the second round because
sacrificial rosebuds.
Right. Mm-hmm. Of course, you have to ask your rabbi about this, but that's what I.
So you would not use the insecticide.
I wouldn't use the insecticide. I wouldn't use the insecticide. Only if, let's say, you've got these huge roses and then they're really fragrant, and so you have a lot of them somehow. You have like maybe 15, 16, 17, and you just use them for Shabbos, let's say. Then maybe you could ask your rabbi.
That's interesting.
And maybe he would say yes.
As often is in these questions, there's a lot of personalized factors that come into play, and therefore you need individual rabbinic guidance to make those decisions.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So let's say you have a big field full of weeds. It's like a weed field.
A weed field.
A weed field, yeah. No, not marijuana, but a regular weed field for all you guys from California.
Right, like you.
Who still have all the synapses, more or less.
You're from Berkeley, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Guilty as charged.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you have a normal weed field.
You have a weed field. So you can, and some people say you can burn it.
Burn the field.
Burn the field, yeah. I don't know.
Carefully,
yeah. Controlled burn. I don't think your neighbors would like that so much. They've got these, huge fires, with all these arson fires around here in Jerusalem.
Well, some of our neighbors here in Eretz Israel use that method.
Right, they use that method for forest control management. It's a bit extreme. So that, or you can actually take a weed whacker or harmesh, as they say in Hebrew, and you can actually get it low. You can probably cut maybe up to like 3 centimeters high.
Oh, I'm glad you told me that, because that's an issue of one of the big Knessets that I am involved with the Ketem on. We always have a jungle of weeds there, and usually I encourage them to bring someone in with a chamesh to cut them down, and I wasn't sure I was going to do next year. So you're saying I could tell them, yes, bring the chamesh, because otherwise it's dangerous, because there could be snakes and scorpions. A lot of kids play around there.
Exactly.
It's a health hazard.
Right, exactly. Especially in Eretz Yisrael, there's lots of snakes and scorpions here. We have no shortage of them. So that's you could say. You can also do it probably the best way, but for all you guys who are into environmental issues, you can use spray. You can use herbicides like Roundup, Deganol, Tomahawk. All these stuff. I don't like them. I never used them when I was gardening. I never liked using pesticides because you get really sick from them. Even if I had a mask and I had gloves and I was pretty careful, but I rarely ever did it.
Yeah, I used them sometimes when I felt the need, but I wasn't enthusiastic to use it all the time.
Yeah, here. So that's another thing. And let's say you want to also. It's really not. It's better if you tie up. Let's say you have your front door and you have 2 pots, and say you have a grapevine, you have 2 grapevines. Mm-hmm. You can't train the grapevines to go into into like a sort of an arc, because you're improving them. You're improving them.
Just have to let them go normally.
Grow normally. Unfortunately, it does look ugly. Let's face it, guys. Shmittah is not for the people who are into the aesthetic sense of gardening. It's a problem. But that's
our job as gardeners and advisors to people who want to garden, to try to help them so their garden can look half decent at least during the Shmittah year.
Right.
I mean, I don't want you to give the impression that your garden has to look like a disaster in the Shmittah year. That's not true, right?
Right. No, it's not true.
You can't all those extra things they're saying, making these special arches of that's the type of stuff you can't do during the year. But it can look okay.
Right.
All right.
Exactly.
So agree on that.
Yeah. The other thing is you can't stake plants or trees. You can't stake trees. You can't put like poles or something and then tie them around the tree. The only way that you might be able to do it, to stake trees up, because you are improving them, is let's say it was a really windy area. And maybe you might be able to stake them up on Shmittah.
Because otherwise they could be damaged.
Or they can be damaged, and if you have to replace them, next year, and it might cause you a monetary loss. But in most cases, I would say probably not. But there might be some exceptions, so ask your local rabbi. And the last thing, but not least, is the fissures in the ground.
The fissures,
fissures, depending what part of the states you're in.
Otherwise known as cracks.
It cracks in the ground.
Yes.
You can actually, if you see that there are the feeder roots, which are the top roots in the ground, you can actually put down dirt on them.
Because it's now in danger. The plant is in danger.
It'll kill it. If the roots are exposed, the air will get inside, dry out the roots, and it'll kill it. And I've seen it.
Mm-hmm. So that's like a pekuach nefesh for the plant situation. So therefore, a threat to the life of the plant. So therefore, you can step in and do something which you might normally not be allowed to do. You normally would not put any dirt down, because that would be sort of like a planting type activity or what have you.
Right. Even though our last podcast we talked about installing and fixing water systems. What can I put in like a water system on Shmittah?
Oh, on Shmittah itself?
Yeah. Was that a problem or?
No, it's not a problem, because you're allowed to water during Shmittah. Mm-hmm. So you're also allowed to put in a watering system. Mm-hmm. And again, you might want to be concerned of what your neighbors are thinking you're doing, and they might think, I'm doing some extensive gardening. But no, you can explain you're simply putting in a water system.
Mm-hmm. And what about if, let's say, I have a vacant lot, and I'd say I have weeds or something, and I want to build a garden, or let's say I want to put in, I don't know, let's say I want to put in a pergola, or I want to put in some sort of patio. Bowling alley, yeah, patio or some kind, I want to bowl.
Right.
All that stuff. What could do you think, what is there a problem with that?
Well, no, there's not an halachic problem. I mean, you're not doing agriculture, but you could have a problem that it looks like you're doing some sort of agriculture activity. It could look like, why is he suddenly clearing these weeds? Why is he suddenly
digging around?
What's he doing? Is he trying to plant an orchard? Doesn't he know it's Shmittah?
Yeah.
So that would be like a marit ayin, an appearance of the eye issue. Mm-hmm. And to avoid that, you could simply put up a sign explaining, no, we are not gardening. We are simply building a patio or putting a bowling alley in, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I've always wanted to put a bowling alley in. I've always had that ambition.
Right. Well, knock yourself out. No pun intended. And
yeah, I will.
And you could also just put out bags of cement and other things to make it clear that this is a construction site, not a gardening site.
Yeah. Thanks. That was actually a very good explanation. The outdoor balconies we explained on our last podcast. It has pretty much the same laws of Shmittah as outdoor as garden, as like ground floor garden, garden stuff. But there is actually unique laws of planting indoor gardens. That's really unique. And I know that you can almost really do almost anything in your house. You can plant, you can fertilize normally, you can water normalize.
Why is that?
Why is that? Because a house is exempt from anything that it has a house. It's exempt from being something out watering, having a garden outside.
So you're saying that it's not because it's in the geographic region called Israel that something is stored it's forbidden during the Sabbatical year, but actually if it's connected to the ground, directly connected to the ground, or nursing from the ground, from the air and whatnot, in the sunlight.
Yeah.
But in indoors environment, totally indoor closed environment, is not considered from the ground, and therefore the laws don't apply. It's as if you're in New York or London or someplace else.
The only caveat is that you have to have a plate that is wider than the circumference of the bush or plant side to side in your house. That's it. And you can't really take them off and you can't take them on. Some people are strict about other people in Michael. Some people say you cannot deliberately take a pot off and then just take it, and then that means that you have a plant that's actually getting its nutrition from the ground, from the balato. You can't do that. Other people might be a little bit more makel or lenient because Shmitta is only the Rabbanan, is only the rabbis now. It's not Doraita or Torah law, which hopefully Hanoch will explain later in next podcast in his own inimitable way. So that's pretty much the end of this second podcast, Gardening in the Shmittah Year. If you have any questions, queries, complaints, or even compliments, you can contact me at donigermichael@gmail.com and maybe give us some tips on maybe what you would like to hear on this podcast or the next podcast or any other podcast you would like to hear from us.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Great to be here today with you.
Great to be here with you, too, in our fabulous studio here.
Yes, in scenic Har Nof Juice. Good night. Goodbye.
Bye.